I'm happy to be here for this really exciting panel discussion. I'm Colleen Tartow, and I'm Director of Engineering for our data products line of business at Starburst Data. And today I'm joined by three really incredible engineering leaders to discuss how we can build engaged engineering teams that are both happy and productive. And I'm going to start by noting that all four of us would like you to know that our companies are hiring, and we're going to put the links to our career pages in the chat. So please take a look and reach out to any of us if you're interested. And I'm sure by the end of this panel, you're going to want to work with all four of us. And so I'll start today by letting these fine gentlemen take a moment to introduce themselves before we get into the main topic. So Snir, are you able to turn on your video?
Yeah, I think there's a certain issue, a certain problem, but my video is probably will be turned on in a second. So I'll start with my introduction.
Sure.
I'm Snir. Nice to meet everyone. CTO at Codility. My strength and experience are in the area where technology, business, and people overlap, building and growing high-performance engineering organizations to meet business goals by utilizing technology and by forming effective culture and processes. I've been doing that for the past 20 or so years on various technical leadership roles in early-stage startups, in rapid growth startups, and as well as well-established and large global enterprises in Israel, in Thailand, in Germany. And I'm very honored to be here and to be given the opportunity to share my learnings and experience with all of you.
Great. Thank you, Snir. Lewis, you're next.
Hi, I'm Lewis Tuff, VP of Engineering here at blockchain.com. And I look after all of the technology underpinning blockchain.com services from the consumer product side, Wallet, Explorer, and Exchange, and on the institutional side. And prior to that, I worked in a challenger bank, Revolut, and kind of spearheaded the crypto initiative and project there, which got me passionate about the space and wanted me to go all in. And then prior to that, I was in kind of financial services technology.
Great. Thank you, Lewis. And last but never least, Chris.
Hi. So this room here, hi, I'm Chris. This room here is JP Morgan's study. So JP Morgan is actually a person. It's also the name of the bank where I work right now. So I thought I'd take his workspace and make it my own. So this is me sitting here. I also like biking, so if I ever get to meet you in a city somewhere in this world after COVID dies down, you will probably see me arrive on my bike and leave on my bike again. I worked at technical companies like IBM, but also finance like Morgan Stanley. And most recently, I joined JP Morgan to work on the Athena platform, which is a huge trading platform inside the bank. And there I will be the developer advocate lead. So I'm very much interested in productivity of engineers from a personal perspective, but also I've been helping other engineers to become more productive. And that led to the book Communication for Engineers. But this is just for me to actually become one, like an expert in communication, because I believe in teaching by learning or learning by teaching, one of the two. Anyway, so I'm very much interested in productivity, and this panel is really going to be exciting, I think.
Great. Thanks, Chris. I have to commend you. Your graphics game is really on point here, so I appreciate that. All right, so let's get to it. I'd love to hear more about we all were really drawn in by the topic of happiness and productivity and the link between these two things. So Snir, I'd love to have you start us off by talking about how these two things are correlated. And I'd love to hear more about how you can tell if an engineer is actually happy and productive and how you can actually quantify these, or can you quantify them?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I think it's a great question. The question is about happiness, and I think it's important to establish the connection between happiness and motivation first in order to answer that question properly. So let's try and do that for the first minute or so. So happiness is a peak emotion, right? Something has to happen for happiness to be achieved. The harder that thing is to achieve, the higher the level of happiness we achieve, right? And that's called the happiness paradox. And so what keeps us going when things are hard, this is where motivation comes in. And motivation acts as the fuel that keeps us going towards meeting the things that make us happy, right? And then figuring out what truly makes someone happy is very hard. Different things make different people happy. But the systems of levers that affect motivation is more common and is simpler for us to influence as leaders. And we can make sure that the fuel, the motivation, is at maximum levels because that's within our circle of influence, right? And so let's for a second focus on what affects motivation, right? And Dan Pink wrote in his famous book Drive, which I highly recommend, by the way, and he differentiates between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is driven by external forces, such as money or praise. Intrinsic motivation is something that comes from within and can be, as simple as joy that someone feels when accomplishing a challenging task. Extrinsic motivation is helpful and has a tendency to lose effectiveness over time, whereas intrinsic motivation is typically a more effective element in the long term for achieving goals and for completing tasks in a way that makes you feel more, fulfilled and as a result happy. And so let's focus for a second on the factors that affect intrinsic motivation. And these are the ability to have autonomy, right? The desire to be self-directed. The second one is purpose, the desire to do meaningful work. And the third one is mastery, the gain and application of new skills and knowledge. The last part of the question was, how do we quantify, happiness and the effect of intrinsic motivation? And also here I divide the answer into two parts. One part is, one section is intangibles and the other one is tangibles. On the intangibles, things that are a little bit harder to quantify, but you can still feel that they're there, is the level of safety and trust in the organization, right? Free flow of opinions, people speaking up, not being afraid to sound opinions that are different from their managers, high level of morale, enthusiasm, passion, creativity, constructive feedback culture, mutual appreciation. These are intangible elements. On the tangible elements, and these are, again, elements that are easier to quantify and measure, then teams meeting their goals, teams velocity, planned versus actual, kind of a drive to meet the commitments, low level of attrition, employee engagement and NPS scores, participation in employee engagement on its own is a great way to measure engagement by employees. And lastly, percentage of promotions from within the organization is a great way to quantify the level of intrinsic motivation within the organization.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I like how you brought it back kind of to the psychological safety and, even Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Louis, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think I really love the point about finding individuals' different passions and really giving them the ability to double down and build on those. And I think that's something that we try to do here at Blockchain.com. I'm sure many other companies are doing, is like working with individuals and really understanding what makes them tick, what drives them, and also allowing them to be creative and exploring those passions outside of just the work context. So contributing to like open source projects, technologies, doing kind of a lot of people now are building out kind of YouTube followings, podcasting, doing a lot of kind of extracurricular work that's not asked for or mandated by us or anyone else as a company, but we're supporting them in that endeavor. And that also is a good way to figure out, okay, what are they passionate about? What do they enjoy? And then bringing that feedback loop back into the work environment. So one example is that we had an individual in the team, engineer, super passionate about working on this decentralized finance space. He built out a YouTube following almost overnight of hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And so then we immediately placed him in the team working on those projects moving forwards, combining his passion and his work environment so that maximize his kind of happiness and productivity and also maximize the impact of the individual.
Yeah, it's funny because in the data world, there's data Twitter, and there's really that like whole zeitgeist around people who are just really passionate about that. And I think that's true for every field, but finding people who, are happy and therefore productive in that way is really important. Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm still staring at a black screen for Snir, so I'm waiting for
sorry for that.
video every now and again. You may have to leave and come back. Maybe that's always the joke, right? So yeah, when Snir was talking, it reminded me of this picture, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Oh, yeah. So this was created in 1943. So this is ancient. These are like basic needs that we all need to fulfill before we can start thinking about psychological ones, which are like family, friendship, recognition, self-esteem, but we're all aiming for reaching self-actualization. At least we should. Like, not everybody realizes that they should. So this is the role of leaders to identify in the individuals where do they have room for growth, where can we achieve their potential. I think Lewis mentioned something about like doing a YouTube channel. This is all about creativity, right? And playing, sort of like, can you actually achieve that level of self-actualization? Can you become happy? Because I truly believe that once you get there, or at least parts of it, it will be much easier for you to deliver features much faster with higher quality because you're much more engaged. So this is the intrinsic motivation that Snir mentioned. That's from the top down. Whereas the ones from the bottom up, once you've met them, you're no longer interested, right? Like, who's still interested in their mattress? Like, very few of us. We're much more interested in helping other people because that is something that drives you much longer.
Yeah. That very much applies to, I think, all of our organizations at this point. Those are all really excellent points. And I think something that's on everyone's mind these days is obviously, how does location apply to this, right? Like, it's always easiest to judge someone's mental state, see if they're happy, make sure they're connected to their work, and really, make sure they're being productive if you're co-located, if you can walk over to their desk. But it's also, 2021, and this is the world we live in. So we need to know, how do you do that in a hybrid or a remote environment and at scale? Lewis, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I think it's a great question. And as you say, very topical given the shift in the world over the last 18 months, let alone just kind of engineering industry. I think for us, some of the ways we've done this is you can do these surveys where you're asking individuals to rate their own wellness and well-being and how productive they believe they are, their kind of scale of happiness. I think that only goes part of the way to really answer this question. And so we as leaders need to come up with ways of eliciting some of that information from these individuals beyond just the obvious question of like, are you happy? Are you productive? Are you enjoying your current task at hand, right? And doing that virtually in a video is extremely difficult. But I think that the one of the ways you can do that in this environment is actually doing kind of a 360 review and really kind of getting feedback from multiple people on projects, on people, on products, to really do kind of a retrospective postmortem process on individuals as well as on deliverables. And I think a lot of people are kind of pushed down the agile methodology of actually delivering something to production and then doing some retrospective and learning from that. But we don't often apply it to ourselves as individuals and looking at, okay, did I achieve my OKRs? If not, why not? And start to really kind of work with your manager to understand how you can improve that. And so these kind of exercises and different mental models can be used. This works kind of to a degree virtually, but I think ultimately it's very hard to replicate this in-person co-location. And it's something that we're doing here at Blockchain.com now that travel is becoming a little bit easier globally. Still a lot of problems logistics-wise, but it's becoming a little bit easier. Is actually empowering teams to find that time to get together. Snir's back. Welcome back. And I think that's an important part of the process. Like, we as leaders should empower the teams to be autonomous and really actually offer them the ability to coordinate and bring teams, squads, cross-functional teams together to hash out different problems, right? Some of these require whiteboards. You need to be able to kind of work through these problems in person. That's hard to kind of replicate virtually. So putting in kind of like company-wide events where you have US or regional retreats, putting in kind of team or cross-functional team-specific events where you get together a team that's working on a particular product or set of features to work through some of the problems, I think is super important. And so really kind of empowering leaders to think a little bit differently about how they plan the next quarter and the next few months and these deliverables, and how they encourage teams to kind of come together on a semi-frequent basis to actually leverage that in-person time as effectively as possible. And like the feedback from that is like, hey, it's not an obligation anymore to go in the office on a day-to-day basis. It's now a complete option. But most people take that option because now it's not forced upon them. They can work it around their own schedules. And ultimately, they see the value in the kind of social aspect as well as in the professional aspect of working through problems more efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, no, that's really insightful. Snir, welcome back. We can see you now. It's very exciting. Yes. You have anything to add there about, whether you're co-located or fully remote or hybrid, which is always an interesting challenge?
Yeah, so we're fully remote, and in a paradoxical way, getting physically together once in a quarter or once in a while in a remote first environment actually create that energy, create that magic that was kind of trivial before, but now has a special scent, a special effect to it, and that has proven to be very, very special for us when we do get together physically.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we can worry about as leaders is complexity, which I have a great slide about again. I'm going to do this again. So this is a quote from Ray Ossie, who was Microsoft's chief architect, also co-founder of Lotus Notes, and this was from 2005. So we think old problems are from today. No, they're very old, right? This has always been a problem. I don't think Ray understands complexity well enough because the world we live in today is much more complex, I would think, than 2005.
Yeah.
But his point is that we as leaders have to help our engineers, our developers, to hide the complexity from them. So that is something we have to focus on, and especially now, like you can't walk up to a whiteboard as easily and draw a diagram of the architecture and convey your information that way. We have to work in much more asynchronous ways. So we have to communicate in written materials a lot more than in the past, and these are things that we need to adjust to. But we have a big opportunity to basically reinvent how we do work. Right? This is that's the silver lining around the many lockdowns that we're seeing across the world.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I'm loving this discussion. It's making me think about onboarding and how my onboarding is now entirely written. I'm sure you all feel the same way. And I think, that's one of many actionable tips we can give. Chris, I'd love to ask you, since hiring is something that, everyone listening to this call is tasked with most likely, how can you hire people who you believe will be happy and productive in your organization? And is that something you can predict, especially the happiness part of it?
Yeah, so Lewis made a great point. He said, it's hard to measure happiness. Like you can ask them, how happy are you today? And they will give you a number, but there's cultural biases. There's how people feel. They want to tell you the answer that you want to hear, right? So I've worked in Western cultures, but even in Western cultures, there's differences. I'm just comparing US to Germany, for instance. When I worked at Google, there was a document specifically written for German people how to write English in American style when you write your self-report at the end of the year, because Germans are much more modest, and they write down that they did an okay job. And if you do that as an American, then you look like you're a loser, right? So you have to say you did an awesome job. So this kind of cultural impact on how people communicate has a big impact across all our collaboration, I think.
Mm-hmm. And then, as a follow-up question, how can you retain people once you've got them and they're happy? You can throw them happy hours, right? But in reality, how do you keep folks happy?
So I think happiness is, I've shown you that diagram, right? I'll quickly show it again. So we should aim for allowing individuals to give them the opportunity to achieve. There's 6 boxes there: growth, morality, potential, creativity. If none of them are achievable, they will be unhappy. So maybe it's easier for us to actually detect unhappiness. You can very easily detect a person who's not engaged, a person that is grumpy, a person that will not give answers. Yeah. And then you can start searching in your interactions with that individual and see which one of these boxes do I need to fill or help them fill or coach them to achieve. And the lack of happiness or unhappiness will make them more happy then. So that is one way. The other way, I think, is individuals want to be in control. And
we can see your calendar now.
I've studied why people get stressed as engineers, and I asked around to a lot of people, and it comes down to when you're not in control as an engineer, then you get stressed. Like everything you feel like you can control, you have autonomy of decision making, then you start being able to actually deal with the stress a lot better, and you don't burn out. Mm-hmm. So your calendar is yours, right? It's your calendar, but are you in control? So this is a great slide from Linda Zhang, and she managed her own happiness by, like, this is her actual calendar. But you can say, like, this is like a horrible calendar, right? How can you do any work now? But this is a fake calendar. So she put in like 60% of these meetings are not real, but she put them there to give herself enough free time to actually do work. So this is something we can learn. This is a lesson that people will go very creative ways in creating that control that they don't have in their lives, in order to preserve their sanity. And as leaders and managers and people that have the power to show people what to do, I think it's upon us to actually make this institutionalized, right? The one on Wednesday is full, no meetings Wednesday. A lot of organizations are already doing this so that they allow their individuals to do their own time planning and actually spend that day the way they want to, rather than being chased around by meeting to meeting.
Yeah. It would be hilarious exercise to just show everybody our calendars right now. Let's not do that. We don't want to scare people. So, Lewis, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would just add a slightly different take on that. Definitely agree with the sentiment there. And some of the topics Chris has mentioned. I think above and beyond that, we all here are inherently problem solvers. I think engineers ultimately are happiest when they're solving hard problems. And so really building a culture where you're building and shipping product and you're able to kind of see and feel the gratification of doing that instantly then gives people the feeling of success and allows them to kind of keep learning, keep pushing, and getting that iterative feedback. So I think like having a culture and building a culture where ideas can come from anywhere. If they do come from anywhere, you then actually allow them to execute and act on them. So i.e. at blockchain.com, if someone has an idea for a new product, feature, change, well then experiment and spin that up, give them the time to deliver on that, and they get to see the fruits of their labor or learn from their failures, right? I think the kind of fell fast, fell off the mentality is a good one. And then the final thing is that, if you want to kind of keep them around, you have to give them hard problems and allow them to see those out to fruition. You have to give them the autonomy to actually generate ideas and see them green lit by kind of management leadership, and again, see them through to execution. And I think then finally, you have to recognize the key wins and the failures, right? And actually, you should be highlighting both. And quite often, it's very easy to spend a lot of time on the failures. You mentioned postmortems, retrospectives. It's like not often that you spend a lot of time focused on the wins, right? You may do a shout out in Slack, or you may send a t-shirt out when you deliver a new product or feature. But like we all need to do a better job of making sure that there's kind of equal balance there and you're not veering too far on one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And if I may add something, I totally agree with Lewis. I think that we as leaders also have to be kind of chief reminders officers when we think about how to connect the work that people do on a daily basis with the company's goals, with the company's achievements. Being able to remind, being able to repeat that takes an extra effect in a remote environment. And that allows people to feel impactful, to feel that the work that they do is indeed contributing to the business. And that helps regain people and makes them happy.
Yeah, it all gets back to that motivation you brought up earlier. That's a really good point. Yeah. I'd love to take some questions from the Q&A in the chat. So if anybody has any more questions, please put them in there. But let's start with Marwan. So should managers give free time to employees, like 10 or 20%, so that they can work on projects or tasks that they like? I know this is a practice at places like Google. I'm curious if any of you have implemented something like that. Let's start with Lewis.
Yeah, so I think this is interesting because the 80-20 model is like more a mental model to think about how you manage and prioritize your time rather than like one day a week being carved out where you have nothing and no other distractions. Companies do this slightly differently. I think like the way we've done it is add in a 20% buffer into our sprints and into our kind of like quarterly planning. And the encouragement there is like we have dual leadership, so a product lead and a technical lead who partner to deliver on a set of features or products. And the idea of this is that the technical lead should be driving that 20%, right? Because often the product lead takes the lead and will set the roadmap and strategy. But actually this partnership helps to kind of push back and have this healthy contention, which I think is necessary between product and engineering to help deliver on some of those goals, pay down a technical debt, and make sure that our platform is maintainable, scalable, and really kind of fits the requirements of the business moving forwards and isn't just kind of very short-term thinking and execution.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. Chris.
I've actually worked at Google where 20% was still actually relevant and active. I don't know if it's still in practice as it was in the early days, but the nice thing about 20% is like 20% doesn't mean that you work on things that are just fun, right? This means that you solve a real problem. This is how Gmail got started, by individuals trying to solve a particular problem and do that and create a team like self-organizing team, find similar-minded individuals in the company that are normally not working with, but now they create this virtual team and they start building this thing as the real product, right? That they're not just playing. This is the important part of this. But it allows you to basically work on something else. Like your job might be important, but maybe boring. You don't know. You want to explore. You're doing all this back-end stuff, and maybe you want to explore some front-end stuff. So you join this 20% team, and you learn front-end technology, and you contribute to this real solution to a real problem. Then you can combine learning and experimenting and playing with actually being preparing yourself for your next step in your career, and then it gets really effective for everybody involved.
Yeah. And I think some companies I've worked at, instead of doing that, do a hackathon. I think it's sort of a similar feel. So Snir, Mohit is asking in the chat, as a manager, how do you identify whether your team and reportees actually trust you? Because trust is such a huge piece of this.
Yeah, there are multiple ways, but to me, one of the strongest signals is the feedback that I'm getting that I don't like to hear. Right, and that tells me that that the level of safety, the level of trust is high when I'm hearing opinions that are different than mine, and that's what makes us, make the best decisions, and that to me is the most significant indication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Getting some good questions in here. Lewis, I'll ping you with the next one. When you're hiring, do you place a higher value on intrinsic value of the candidate or extrinsic value of the candidate?
Interesting. Yeah, I think that for our interview process, which is constantly being iterated on, I would caveat, because I didn't think you ever get to the final perfect process.
Yeah.
We try and balance it out with a few different sessions during the interview loop that cover both your kind of hard or technical skills and experience, where you have practical examples, you've built and shipped product that is relevant to the role that you're applying, as well as how you operated in the complexity of the environment. So understanding how did you work with other people in a team cross-functionally, not just functionally aligned, and what was that experience like? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? And what was it that really kind of you took away from that as being the most valuable aspects, right? Because if you ask someone a question on like, what was the impact, what was the value, and what was the learnings you took away, and they're just like, oh, that the QA team slowed me down, then you can tell pretty quickly that that they're maybe not a good cultural fit for your company, right? And then I think in terms of like passions and really understanding kind of, are they going to be happy and productive? Are they going to bring their best selves to work? think asking around what makes them tick. So for me, like dropping in a few questions on what have they read about recently that's really kind of piqued their interest. Doesn't even have to be about crypto, doesn't have to be about technology or engineering, just what is it that they've read about? And it just shows you they're like an active learner, they're pushing their own understanding, and they have interests beyond just like a 9 to 5. And I think it's important to bring people on board that have this kind of general skill set and overview and communicate well, articulate ideas, and bring kind of their creative self, as well as then having this kind of hard experience that's learned and taught over many years of working professionally.
No, I think that's really interesting.
I have something to add to that. I always like doing a game with candidates, like a real game. But it's not really practical. You can't really do that. But that would be ideal. Like I've been able to do that with only a few candidates, where I play a game of pool with them or darts or whatever. Right. So if you have that opportunity, because this really shows you the motivation that the individual has. Do they really want to win, or do they want to beat you? Or if you have a really good shot, do they compliment you? So
interesting. Yeah,
what are they?
that's actually,
right? So this is a real life situation. It's fake, of course, in it. But it shows you the real personality of the individual and the motivations. Yeah. So try and find something like that. Coding exercises are bad for this. Pair coding is much more appropriate for this, because then you can see, like, we're solving this problem together, and how do you contribute to that? It's like a game, right? And we're solving it together now.
Yeah.
So try and search for that kind of motivation in that layer. Yep.
Yeah, I think especially when you're hiring leaders, that's incredibly important, and I like that way of doing it. Maybe putting a little
one more slide I want to share. This is like the last one that I had prepared, and this is very timely because Lewis talked about this in recognition. So it's very important to recognize individuals, both in the positive and constructive way, and how important positive feedback can be. This is a friend of mine, and 9 years ago, he complimented somebody for complimenting him, right? And this had made such an impact on him that he was reminded of this now, like last week. So this is a random compliment that he received 9 years ago that has made such a big impact on him that he still cherishes this right now, so much longer. So we should compliment our fellow colleagues a lot more. Yeah. So
that's lovely.
Lewis, you did awesome, man. This is Snir. I really like the answers too. Yeah, and
I think you're all wonderful.
Now we're doing this. Yes.
So we have a minute and a half left, and I want to do like a really quick lightning round because Merv in the chat asked a really good question. And for those of you whose questions we didn't get to, we're going to the lounge after this, but we'll have some time for extra Q&A. So feel free to drop in there. But let's each give me like a really quick answer of if you have to take one thing to increase productivity that will keep people happy as well, what would it be? Snir, let's start with you.
Yeah, creating a very clear focus on what we're trying to achieve and making sure that the team has the right skills, end-to-end cross-functional skills to achieve it will make them productive and happy.
I love it. I love it. Lewis, thoughts?
Yeah, so I've actually worked with engineering managers and technical leads to science check their calendar. Funny enough, that was mentioned earlier, and just cut out superfluous meetings. I mean, I think that everyone should, on a quarterly basis, I do this myself, actually go through their meeting with fine-tooth comb and really understand, is there value being added here? Is this a standing meeting that's been put in and now is in there for the rest of eternity?
Absolutely. I love that. Chris?
So in order to become more happy at work, we do only 30% of our time actually coding. The other 70% is talking about our coding. So we have to learn how to do that. So you have to invest in communication techniques. So this is speaking, writing, collaboration with other people. So these are things that we should invest in. And then if you do that, you will become happy automatically.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love those little snippets. Those were great action items. This has been an incredible discussion. I feel like we could go on forever, but unfortunately we're out of time. I want to thank you all for your attention and your insightful questions and discussions, and hopefully we'll see you in the extra Q&A. Thank you so much.
See you in the lounge.